Greetings, my fellow freedom lovers, sovereign thinkers. This is LL3's newest podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful swampy mangroves of South Florida. And today's date, Tuesday, May 16th, 2017. Yeah, you hear some people chatting in the background. And I'm at CJ's Java Lounge, located at 400 Southwest 1st Avenue, along the beautiful New Rivers of Fort Lauderdale, a new river of Fort Lauderdale, only one river. And it's mainly in the southwest section of the Andrews Avenue Bridge, right by the New River Yacht Club. Precisely. So, it's gonna be actually just hanging out. Nice little breeze, warm but breezy. So, like it in this area. Pretty quiet and keen. Has a few issues, like every other community, but I like it. So, yeah, so I was going to be talking about the whole thing with the whole McMaster warmonger, and just wondering if the Trump administration, U.S. government's going to make a deal with Saudi Arabia, a $100 million deal for weapons. Yes, God bless imperialism. Like I said, my friends, the more things change, the more it stays the same. That's why idolatry in politics is extremely dangerous. I'm watching a couple of videos, one by John Whitehead on civil asset forfeiture. Of course, Donald Trump was chatting with some of the sheriffs and so forth, what they do for drugs and taking people's money without due process. Oh, yeah, we should just do it this way. And, of course, Jeff Sessions tweeted Tweedledum. It's like, oh, Barack Obama and Loretta Lynch revisit it. And, okay, so enough for that little rant there. So we're just going to do a little browsing around yesterday. And this one really caught my eyes from the Duran.com. Came out yesterday. And it says here, carving out Kurdistan is the U.S. new endgame in Syria. This is by Andrew Corbigo. As it reads here, the war in Syria has taken many twists and turns over the past 6 years. But the conventional part of the campaign seems to be drawn to an end. Russia's anti-terrorist intervention turned the tables on the moderate opposition rebels and forever precluded any chance that they succeed in violently topping the democratically elected and legitimate government of President Assad. The militant promotion of regime change is no longer in the cards for Syria, and great advances have been made on the anti-terrorist front against Daesh. But that doesn't mean that the U.S. is still in danger to the Arab Republic. Channeling the adopted strategies of hybrid war, the U.S. changed its primary goal in Syria and is now seeking to geopolitically fragment the country to compensate for the failure for its years-long regime change operation. And it's using the PYD-YPG Kurds and its battering ram for doing so. The proxy group leads the Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, offensive against Daesh and Raqqa, and is already in control of a broad swath of northeastern Syria. The Trump administration announced last week that it will be providing heavy weaponry to the SDF to aid in their anti-terrorist operation. But this is just a front for creating the core of a conventional army in the heart of the Mideast, trained and advised by U.S. Special Forces. It is probably for the same reason and the belated realization of what really unfolding in the region that Russia has noticeably cooled in its support for the Syrian Kurds lately. President Putin said on Monday that Russia isn't supplying arms to this group and that it maintains contact with them, even at least for avoiding possible collisions and situations that could create threats to our servicemen, which is a lot different of a tone than a full-throated endorsement that Moscow's representatives have previously given to the group in arguing that they should be incorporated into a multilateral peace process of Astana and Geneva. Part of the reason for this change in attitude clearly has to do with the success of the Russian-Turkish rapprochement, but it can't be discounted that an equally powerful driving motivator is that Moscow finally came to terms with the U.S. new endgame in Syria. American ambitions. Here's what the U.S. is aiming to accomplish nowadays. 1. Construct a conventional Kurdish military force in Rojava. The U.S. endeavors to transform the YPG militia into a formidable conventional military force inside the conquered territories of northeastern Syria. Syria is strong enough to resist any Turkish invasion or post-Daesh liberation attempted by the Syrian Arab Army. American advisors and military trainers are instrumental in facilitating this process, but it would be incomplete without the shipment of heavy weaponry, which was just announced. The combination of elite instructors and the state-of-the-art warfighting tools is expected to eventually result in the formation of an impressive fighting force which would be capable of holding its own, though with the caveat being that this would only remain so long as the U.S. 3 military facilities in Tabaka, an Arab, known to the Western audience as Kobani, and Hasaka remain in place. Okay, so the next one here is number 2. Forge a decentralized, federalized statelet in northern Syria. Despite the U.S. public statements to the contrary, Washington is hoping to see a new conventional Kurdish military proxies as the vehicle for forging a decentralized, federalized statelet in northern Syria, which could legitimize the geopolitical designs in the region. Without the aforementioned development of their armed forces, the U.S. allies cannot succeed in staving off or responding to a Turkish invasion or an SAA liberation operation, both of which could be launched to stop this plan dead in its tracks. The U.S. is therefore using the Kurds as a military deterrent of sorts in safeguarding its adapted hybrid wars objectives in Syria, which are no longer about forcibly overthrowing President Assad, but have morphed to become the creation of a fortified outpost and the geostrategic four nations juncture point of transitional Kurdistan. So be more like have their own regime. That's how I literally see this. And 3, use the second geopolitical Israel to exert regional influence. U.S. ambitions to carve a Kurdistan out of the Mideast are akin to repeat the patterns of Israel's creation in the sense that foreign powers forming a proxy statelet out of the territory or of other countries for hegemonic divide and rule purposes. This entity could become a terrorist safe haven for other anti-government groups or Kurdistan and otherwise fighting Iran, Turkey, Iraq, and Syria. Moreover, pertaining to the Arab Republic at the center of this article, the U.S. plans to take advantage of the fact that much of Syria's freshwater, electricity, hydropower via Katka, agriculture, and fossil fuel resources either lay within YPG occupied territory or the areas that they convey, meaning that the above-mentioned Kurdish decentralized or federalized statelet would wield disproportionate strategic influence over the rest of Syria if it were allowed to come into existence. So possibly another chartered nation, allegedly speaking. Concurrent process. There are 2 important processes unfolding concurrently alongside the U.S. Kurdish endgame for Syria. It is important to briefly touch them because it will soon be demonstrated how they could greatly contribute to the most realistic peaceful compromise scenario between Damascus and the Kurds, however imperfect it may end up being in practice. Nationwide de-escalation safe zones. It seems inevitable that de-escalation zones will eventually give the rise to decentralized units inside of Syria, especially if they are implemented nationwide, though the latter is exactly what the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov says that he spoke to U.S. President Trump during his visit to D.C. last week, according to Russia's top diplomat, to discuss how this practice will be extended to the rest of the territory, which additionally infers that more guarantor states that will have to sign on this new agreement in order to supply necessary peacekeepers for enforcing it, at least insofar as it relates to Rojava. UNSC Resolution 2254's mandate for constitutional reform. This December 2015 document stipulates that Syria must reform its constitution and hold new elections within 18 months, meaning that the deadline for its implementation is the next month in June 2017. The time frame will probably be extended by an upcoming UNSC resolution, but maintain point here is that both Russia and the U.S. agree that Syria must amend the supreme law of the land as a form of political compromise in ending the country's crisis. It's naturally foreseeable that this could involve decentralization or federalization, especially given how the Russian written draft constitution explicitly calls for the one, ambiguously leaves open the possibility for the second. Something to look at, huh, right? Scenario. Given the 5 factors elaborated on above, it is possible to prognosticate the 3 most likely scenarios for Syria's near future as they're related to the U.S. plans for Kurdistan. The first to deal with conflicts that have been discussed at length before any various analysis, while the last one is original and present what might be the only peaceful compromise solution to this problem. Turkey invades east of Euphrates. This scenario has been talked about quite a lot over a couple of weeks, ever since Erdogan openly threatened it, though the author was one of the first to predict this course of action in March following the liberation of Palmyra. The guiding idea is that Turkey's national security interests, and the one can argue even its very existence as a state, are seriously jeopardized by the U.S. Kurdistan plans in northern Syria, and that unless Ankara can replace the ruling PYD-YPG militia with the pro-Turkish Kurdish National Council, offshoot of the Iraqi-based Kurdish Democratic Party, or KDP, then it would have no choice but to invade northern Syria east of the Euphrates in an attempt to take out what's the views be one of the most dangerous terrorist groups in the Mid-East. So this is like a part of this kill bone who's going to benefit. Let's help these folks out, and we can rule them in a diplomatic fashion and using other methods if necessary. All right, so civil war breaks out between Arabs and Kurds. If the Kurds aren't stopped in Rojava, then they might carry through on the threats to create a Mediterranean corridor through Idlib and Latakia provinces, which would bring YPG-SDF conflict into the SSA and spark an actual civil war between the Syria's Arabs and Kurdish population. This could be offset through a territorial swap of sorts, such as one of which the author forecasts in the latest of this Context Countdown radio show, which that case would see the Kurds surrender any forthcoming conquest of their Arizor and or Raqqa to the SAA in exchange for Damascus, recognizing their self-proclaimed statelet and granting them economic transit rights to the sea. If that plan doesn't work, however, the only alternative to the SSA waging a liberation war in the YPG-SDF occupied territories will be the final proposal explained below. So you see what's been going. You see what can occur. All right. So hopefully, you folks out there are connecting the dots. I'm doing the same thing as I narrate this. So, excuse me. Here, U.S. gains control of the Kurdish de-escalation zone and decentralized federalized Syria. The last scenario might be difficult to imagine at this point, but it is based off an adoption of the 2 concurrent processes unfolding alongside the U.S. Kurdistan plans. There is no chance that the Kurds will agree to permit troops from the tripartite tripartite of Russia, Iran, and or Turkey to patrol their conquered territories in a de-escalation zone. Agreement is extended to that region, though they already have no such problem with the U.S. setting up 3 bases there. It is unrealistic to expect the U.S. to pack up and leave after Daesh is defeated, let alone to take with all of the heavy weaponry that was given to the SDF, so it appears to already be a fait accompli that only the peaceful post-Daesh solution in Syria is to eventually integrate the U.S. into this escalation zone framework by making it the formal guarantor of Rojava. Corresponding, it naturally follows that the state of affairs will be institutionalized through heavy international pressure on Syria is to amend its constitution in order to implement decentralization or federalization, essentially making the U.S. Kurdistan plans a reality, though in exchange of some sort of concession from Washington and for reliable assurances that it won't immediately use its entry for destabilizing the region in any case. Washington can never be trusted, but this final scenario represents a last-ditch trade-off to avoid either the Turkish invasion and or Arab-Kurdish civil war with Russia. It is influence to convince Turkey and the SAA to abide the grand deal that it might reach with the U.S. in exchange for Washington doing the same with the YPG Kurds. Granted, this scenario is only feasible so long as Russia lacks the political will to seek military solution to this pressing people. So it's like this. Who's going to make the deal? What's the best deal out there? Based on what I've read. Concluding thoughts. It should be it should be beyond the reasonable doubt of any objective observer that has the U.S. switch its destabilization plans in Syria for seeking President Assad's violent ouster to endeavoring to carve up the Arab Republic of Kurdistan, though it's equally evident that Russia presently has no desire to directly stop the U.S. scheme from succeeding for a variety of reasons mostly related, in one way or another, to Moscow's fear of becoming engulfed in an Afghan-like quagmire. Russia is prioritizing a political solution to a war on Syria, and even at the expense of some of its grand strategic interests, such as stopping the creation of a second geopolitical Israel, taking solutions from the fact that it has decisively contributed to the defeat of Daesh and at least obtained lasting post-war military and economic influence in Syria. While Turkey and especially Syria itself might feel uncomfortable with Russia reaching any sort of deal with the U.S. over Kurdistan, none of them would probably have enough political will to unilaterally contradict Moscow's wishes in undertaking military action against a prospective Kurdish statelet. Moreover, there is no reason to believe that Russia would engage in any related discussions with the U.S. on this subject without keeping its Syrian and tripartite partners in the looms at all times. Whether they are ultimately satisfied with the outcome of these speculative talks or not, they might still nonetheless be forced to accept that it is best possible result that could be hoped for under the circumstances of each of them earlier pledging to abstain from a military solution. The biggest challenge standing in the way of Damascus and the tripartites' desire to stop the second geopolitical Israel is that they each already allow the U.S. to go far in its mission creep by setting up 3 separate bases, dispatching over 1,000 troops, and sending heavy weaponry to the Kurds. Russia also demonstrated during the immediately after Trump's cruise missile strike against the SAA last month that it has absolutely no desire whatsoever to enter any scenario which could even remotely lead to an armed conflict with the U.S. and Syria. Hence the clear statement that it won't shoot down any future cruise missile salvos. So it would make sense for Moscow to abruptly reverse its policy trajectory and threaten to go to war with Washington, expelling the U.S. from Rojava. Keeping in mind Russia's wish to enter the new identity with the U.S. and the chummy relations that Lavrov and Tillerson seem to have cultivated with one another already. It appears ever more likely that both great powers are moving towards in a strategic convergence of sorts in reaching a compromise solution to the war in Syria. It is not yet known exactly what is that the U.S. will give up in exchange for possibly securing Russia and its allies' passive acceptance of a Kurdish statelet in northern Syria. But even the fact that this might prevent, or at least a larger hot war from breaking out in the near future, might be sufficient enough for all parties to agree to it in order to buy more time and prepare a continuation conflict. Whatever the case may be, and in spite of the author's respectful disagreement with this approach, it arguably looks like Russia and the U.S. are at the very least deliberating on a deal for Rojava, and that could conceivably involve the U.S. agreeing to become the fourth guarantor in the nationwide implementation of Russia's de-escalation zones, and then codifying its existing military position into a post-war political reality through Damascus' acceptance of the Russian written draft constitution. Again, this is not an optional solution to the Kurdish question, nor is the author endorsing this scenario. But at this point in time, all indications points in this direction, and it seems to be the most realistic proposal being pursued behind the scenes, although there are still multiple eventualities which could offset it. So, the whole thing is this. Cui bono, who's going to benefit? That's the question. And it's interesting. So some people may have, some people may be critical with this whole article. One person, some people give a little bit of criticism. Corbo has done incredibly for him uncharacteristically sloppy and uninformed piece out of hurry of boredom, or perhaps both. He had totally misses the point in almost every respect. I'm going to forget that you wasted your time to finally produce such nonsense, and I suggest you do the same, Mr. Corbo. Hope you get well soon. Okay, so there's some criticism on this. We don't know the whole. And like it says here about Adam Gari, you have successfully ignored every statement by Russia to the effect that it will defend the territorial integrity of its ally. Furthermore, Russia never supported Kurdish territorial ambitions in Syria, when that Kurds should have a seat at negotiations along with other criminal combatant groups. How you could imagine that Putin's Russia would have reneged on its promise and renounced its principles is beyond me. So it's just how I look at this too is how I see this about the thing with Kurdistan. If they're gonna try to be a free nation, you always gotta be leery who's pulling the strings allegedly, who's looking out for the best interest. It happens a lot. Like that's why I call them not independent territories of nations, but chartered nations. Is there any resources, allegedly right now, resources that the U.S. may want? You never know. I wouldn't be surprised, and even other nations that are involved in this as well. So that's how I look at it, with all sincerity. The pros and cons. But one thing for sure, the people in that region, the Kurds, if they want to stick with Syria, that's fine. If they want to be an independent nation, they have to earn it. People are tired of fighting in that area anyway. That's just an example. How long will this go? How many more people will suffer? they knew have to have a peace agreement. And I know, too, even with Syria, for an example, like I'm not lovey-dovey with Assad by any means. But he had an opportunity to have peace talks because they were actually destroying those the rebels. And, of course, and the Tomahawk missiles came in with that whole suffering of the gas attack. Some people believe that Assad actually did it. But based on the whole synopsis, what I examined, it's not really that accurate. The man has his rough edges. I'm not going to defend him by any means. But sometimes it's always a little stage event, false flag event, to get people up in arms. So I'm going to hit this next one here. By Zero Hedge. Is by Tyler Durden. It says, Israeli minister, the time has come to assassinate Bashar Assad. It says Israel's housing and construction minister, Yoav Gallant, called for the assassination of Syrian President Bashar Assad following yesterday's U.S. State Department reports that the Syrian regime was using a prison crematorium to hide mass killings outside Damascus, Jerusalem Post reported. It says here, speaking at a conference outside Jerusalem, Gallant, a retired Israeli Defense Force general, said in the light of the recent allegations that Assad regime carried out of mass executions and burned the bodies of the victims, he had to be killed. In reality, in which people were executed in Syria, being hit deliberately by chemical weapons, their bodies being burned, something we haven't seen in 70 years. In my view, we've crossing a red line. In my view, the time has come to assassinate Assad. As simple as that. The Gallant, who previously served as the head of the IDF Southern Command, the minister said Assad's actions in Syria amount to nothing less than a genocide with hundreds of thousands killed. Gallant also likened the assassination of Assad to cutting off the tail of the snake. After that, he said we can focus on the head, which is in Tehran. You see what's been going on? It's like, let's start a bigger war, and we'll go to this little witch hunting fetish. In a conversation with the Times of Israel after his speech, Gallant stood by his comments and acknowledged that targeted political assassinations are considered illegal under international law, but clarified that he wasn't speaking about practicalities. However, he added, anyone who murders people and burns their corpses does not have a place in this world. Okay, so there's been reports about how the Palestinians are being executed. Can you explain that, sir? That's okay, right? As reported on Monday, the United States Department accused the Assad regime of carrying out mass killings of thousands of prisoners and burning the bodies in a large crematory outside the capital. The U.S. said it believed that 50 detainees a day are being hanged at Sandania military prison, about 45 minutes north of Damascus. Many of the bodies, it said, are then burned in the crematorium. We believe that the building of the crematorium is an effort to cover up the extent of mass murders taking place, said Stuart Jones, the top U.S. diplomat for the Middle East, and accusing the Syrian government of sinking to a new level of depravity. Now, if you understand war, a lot more complex than that. According to Gallant, while it's unclear whether or not the crematorium was in use for all those years, it is imperative that something must now be done. The Obama administration made a strategic mistake, Gallant said, by deviating from the course of support of Sunni countries in order to try to come closer to Shiite countries, something which Gallant said indifferent in the Trump administration. During his speech, Gallant also said that in a wider view, Assad and his ally Hezbollah, the Lebanese terror group, are larger threats to the world order than the Islamic State and other Sunni terrorist groups. Gallant was speaking at the Israel Defense Publication Ground Warfare and Logistics Conference at the Tank Museum in Lat-Run. Up until a year and a half ago, Syria looked like it was heading towards a Sunni rule, but following the Russian intervention, who used methods for use in Chechnya, such as blockading cities while continuing aerial bombardments, the will of the rebels to fight was broken and the tides turn. But while the Russians are currently backing Assad, they realize the importance of the region and understand who they aligned with, Gallant said. They realize once the war is over, there will still be 20 million Sunnis in Syria who will be wanting to avenge their dead, and the Russians know they will be a target, Gallant said, adding that the Russians will seek avenues to make relations better with the Sunnis, including sacrificing Assad. As for ISIS, the Israeli minister was laconic. The world will wipe out Daesh and the Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda, he said. Gallant said his assessment came from the fact that those terrorist groups do not enjoy the same level of support as Syria and Hezbollah, which are backed by Iran. And again, indeed, his main focus was Tehran. Was behind Syria is Hezbollah, who is backed by Iran. Iran is a danger to the security of the entire world. Iran is a problem, not the solution. By getting to Assad, Gallant said, we get to Tehran. When we get to the tail of the snake, we can get to the head of Tehran too. In short, it's refreshing that it's an increasingly volatile world as the nothing has changed in the Middle East. Absolutely. So the whole thing is, let's go witch hunting. We'll blame this country for rhetoric without any merit. Let's attack Iran. Yeah. But there's plenty of videos out there how the people in the West Bank are getting shot at with manure, spraying it in their communities, getting people sick and having them suffer and throwing up. Explain that to me, Gallant. Explain that wall and people being deprived by it. It's all a bunch of garbage as far as I'm concerned. And this is why I'm real critical with the Israeli government. Because they believe they can control every one of us, use the United States as well as their damn watched pit bulls. Mad dogs, okay? Without us, respectfully, it can really affect their might. And I know soon the people in Israel themselves are tired of this. They're seeing the propaganda, the deception, and the good people out there are suffering from it. Have a war in Tehran. I've been hearing this garbage over and over and over again. Yes, I do remember the Wesley Clark interview at Democracy Now! And Seven Nations. Iran was one of them. Stop lying to us, you bastard. All it is nothing but supporting the military-industrial complex and Israel's version of a one world order. I'm going to continue on here on this next article, which is by Digital Journal. It says here, Bitcoin hackers anonymous currency. This is by Michael Marquardt from AFP. The perpetrators of the global cyber attack that has caused havoc in 150 countries demanded ransom money in Bitcoins, but experts believe that the anonymity that the virtual currency affords is not necessarily impenetrable. Bitcoin heavily coded electronic tokens that taken their time from software first put online in February 2009 by several software designers using pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto essentially allows those who possess them to remain anonymous. The message that flashed up on hundreds of thousands of screens affected by the WannaCry virus over the last few days demanded a payment of $300 or 275 euros in Bitcoin. Oops, your files have been encrypted. It warned that if payments was not made within 3 days, the price would double, and if none was received within 7 days, the locked files would be deleted. Bitcoin is digital cash. The transactions are totally anonymous and non-refundable. However, they're totally traceable. Nicholas Tabak of London-based Baldwin Capital that specializes in virtual currency said all transactions are stored in databases called blockchains. It's anonymous, but anyone can monitor a Bitcoin address and see how the money moves, the box says. No one can take the money off those who hold it, but it's possible to follow in the detail the activity on the account. That is a problem for investigators, according to Pierre-Antoine Gailly, who compiled a study of Bitcoin on a cyber currency for the French state body CSCSE in 2015. Bitcoin doesn't need a bank, so this monetary flow escapes any supervision and any checks. He told AFP that accounts don't have a physical address or bank address. They are not stored centrally. Anonymity comes before anything else. Ransom, not the point. The extent of the damage it caused to computers around the world, the number of victims, and the sheer number of companies concerned is likely to push international investigators and national security agencies to investigate the Bitcoin address to which any ransom money has been paid. Adding to the complexity of tracking the hackers, the holders of Bitcoin can use services available on the so-called dark web known as tumblers, which can offer an additional layer of anonymity. The tumbler divides the Bitcoin amounts into thousands of tiny pieces, spreads them around millions of different addresses, and carries out lots of transactions, said Manuel Valente, a manager of the Bitcoin selling service in Paris. Within a week, all the Bitcoins can be put on the address with the aim of covering the holder's tracks. It's essentially money laundering of Bitcoins. And the people offer this kind of service on the dark web. Clement Francami, the Director General of Unicat, a software company that specializes in blockchain, said collecting ransoms was perhaps not the hackers' real aim. The idea was perhaps to show the rest of the world what they pulled off a really big coup. With an attack like that, they're going to get nerdy in an international hacking fraternity. They probably don't have any desire to spend the Bitcoins knowing that they are being monitored. Their real aim is to use their reputation to sell other services. And Francami warns the team has made show of force, and I suppose there will be another attack before very long. European police agencies, Europol, said Tuesday it was too early to say whether North Korea was involved in the cyber massive attack. And I did post it on my Facebook page, on Press for Truth. Usually I post it on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. Those are like three I usually use, post stuff on there. And Dan Dix talked about that, about the hack, and it considered to be a, quote, inside job and fear. And, of course, there's always going to be flaws. Even Suzanne Powell talked about that in the Bitcoin hacking, which I addressed it like last year. You go look at the archives about Bitcoin hacking. One thing I know, too, even many folks always recommend if you got Bitcoin, you have Bitcoin money, never put everything in one basket. Okay, just get a small amount, you'll be fine, and put it in there once in a while. Don't accumulate too much. Because remember, I always said everything has a flaw. You gotta be vigilant. Okay, even with credit cards and all that, try not to leave everything in one area. So. It's interesting about that cyber attack, but many people believe it's CIA sponsored. All right. This one here is interesting, and this one's sponsored by Patriotics blog, and it's just exclusive. U.S. Marshals readying plan approved by Justice Department officials. The U.S. Marshals Service presented a plan to a senior Justice Department official yesterday for the service of warrants and the Trump-Russia inquiry. Separate sources with links to the intelligence and law enforcement community's report. The extensive plan was approved yesterday by a senior Justice Department official who is closely involved in prosecuting the case. Sources said that the extensive plan, multiple pages in length, covered not only serving of the warrants, but logistical arrangements such as closure of streets if necessary. They further report while timing is uncertain, such plans are normally only presented and approved when the arrests are imminent. Patriotics knows the identity of the senior justice official who approved the plan and the court which was approved. We are redacting that information for now. More a story as it develops. I want to acknowledge by the following tweets Claude Taylor made last night. My sources support sources and go further. He has asked me to reproduce them exactly as written. And says here, one, the follower knows I tried to avoid exact timeline as I went to expect arrest. Now I'm receiving word that it may be soon. And here's why. Let's check this out here. And it says here, 2, in order to avoid any possible misrepresentation, I'm going to give the exact word for the quote. What I was told, rumor has it that AUSA has signed off the tactical logistical plans to make numerous subjects into custody. That's word for word. And it says here by Nicholas Falachi, and I have zero faith in Sessions or Rothstein to do the right thing when it comes to prosecuting these people. Claude Taylor replies, the gulf between Sessions and Rothstein in reference is incalculably large, really shouldn't appear in the same sentence. So, these are some of the tweets she had. You're just going to hit that link on there by Claude Taylor. True facts stated. Hold on. Beep. Let's go. So, to explain it there. And, yeah, so let's just give you an example. And the arrest warrant should be right here under the Marshal News. Nothing really, so I'm just going to leave it at that. It's very, like I said, we'll just see how long this will go, right? Yeah, of course. So I'm not going to go too bonkers, but let's see how much merit does this case have, all right? Yeah, finally, this is one pretty short and sweet. Not going to find good news. Denmark arrests man wanted by Rwanda in 1994 probe. Copenhagen, Denmark. Danish authorities says the Danish nationals have been arrested upon an extradition request from Rwanda, where he's suspected of committing crimes against humanity in 1994. Prosecutor Martin Stassen said the 49-year-old man was arrested Tuesday on suspicion of taking part in a massacre in a church and at a university where more than 1,000 people were killed. Stassen said, after a very thorough investigation, it is our opinion that there is a basis for his extradition. He said the man who wasn't identified moved to Denmark in 2001 and got Danish citizenship in 2014. Stassen added Denmark's extradited 4 years ago a man from Rwanda where he's being tried. More than 500,000 were killed in the genocide by Hutu extremists against the Tutsi minority and Hutu moderates in 1994. Yeah, that was the massacre in Rwanda, and I do remember that pretty damn thoroughly. And I did a little history on that, research, and a good book to get too. It's called The Holocaust in Rwanda. And let me see if I'm going to look that up right now. See if I get this available. But I might just add that to my footnotes. As people have the right to know what happened. And let me see here. Which one has a lot more merit? Yeah, so, but a lot of it too was based on, gun control and all that. They did one on Frontline Fellowship. Let me see here. And, well, definitely, Frontline Fellowship. Yeah, that is something to check out. Well, they did a real, did a book on that. And, let me just look this up here. Yeah, that's something, I'll add this to the memo. You can really look at this up yourselves. And, it's very interesting what has occurred. And they have one on Rwanda, so let me see here. Yeah, by Peter Hammond. So I'm going to leave that up there. And something you folks can check out. I'm just going to... Oh, it's a good book, by the way. So, definitely examine it. Peter Hammond did a good job and talking about the steps, what was used, including victim disarmament. That's what you have to look at. Yeah, I got it right here. Fantastic. The book on here, you could you get the book and all that on the Christian Liberty books. So I'm going to put that in the memo so you can folks to do your orders. And of course, the Holocaust. Hotel Rwanda was a decent movie. But one thing I noticed when they did the DVD, they talked about Amnesty International, and the problem with Amnesty International, there was claims that they claimed that they were funded by George Soros' group or Open Source Foundation. But one I know for sure, they're very anti-self-defense. That is a fact. You folks can look that up yourselves. This is why I define all forms of genocide and democide regardless. It's just another example why we are always going to be living in a dangerous world, and we cannot rely on government to just rescue us for everything. This time we have to do things ourselves, even create militias, and put their feet to the fire, even on a legitimate, peaceful manner. So definitely check it out. And that is really it. I'd like to thank everyone for listening. Plus, feel free to download and share throughout your social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, or you want to send me something I want to check out, it'd be interesting. Whatever you do, please address your correspondences with decorum. You keep me on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Tumblr, YouTube, Freedoms Network, Scene.life, Minds.com, Future.net, and the other one is Patreon. Have a Patreon account. Patreon.com/LokiLuck3, which is 3 I's all together with Loki Luck. In addition, you could email me at LokiLuck3@gmail.com, or the encrypted ones, folks out there, LokiLuck03@protonmail.com. All right. That's all for now. Once again, thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep on spreading love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.